The evening was calm, the sky painted in hues of purple and orange as the sun dipped below the horizon. Inside the towering walls of Mar-a-Lago, the soft murmur of conversation filled the grand hall. Barron Trump sat quietly at the long dining table, his sharp blue eyes scanning the news headlines on his phone. His father, former President Donald Trump, was engaged in a discussion about the upcoming election, but Barron wasn't paying attention. He had just stumbled upon something that made his blood boil. A well-known liberal journalist, David Mercer, had published a hit piece against his mother, Melania Trump. The headline was bold and inflammatory. Melania Trump, the silent, soulless former First Lady who stood for nothing. Barron's grip on his phone tightened. He wasn't one to react impulsively, but this was different. His mother had always been his greatest supporter, a pillar of grace and resilience. To see her name smeared in such a vile way made his stomach churn with anger. He clicked on the article and began reading. Mercer had gone beyond mere political criticism. He had called Melania an ornamental puppet, accused her of being a trophy wife, and implied that she was nothing more than a bystander in her husband's political career. The words stung not because they were true, but because they were so far from the truth. Barron had spent his entire life watching his mother handle pressure with elegance. She wasn't a loud politician, but she was far from weak. He remembered the countless times she had stood up for herself behind the scenes, how she had fiercely protected him from the media's scrutiny, how she had embraced the role of First Lady in her own unique way. He set his phone down, his jaw clenched. This wasn't just another attack on a public figure. This was a direct assault on the woman who had sacrificed so much for their family. Barron knew he couldn't stay silent. The media had long underestimated him, portraying him as a quiet, uninvolved teenager. But at 17, he had developed a sharp mind and a keen sense of justice. And now, he was ready to show the world that the Trump legacy wasn't just about his father. It was about standing up for what was right. Barron leaned back in his chair, his mind racing. He knew how the media worked, how they twisted narratives, how they manufactured outrage, and how they relentlessly pursued those they disliked. But this attack on his mother felt personal. He took a deep breath, recalling his mother's quiet wisdom. "Never let anger control you, Barron," she had once told him. "Think before you act. The strongest response is one that leaves no doubt about your integrity." He wouldn't lash out. He wouldn't scream into the void like the critics who constantly attacked his family. No, he would do something far more effective. He would expose the hypocrisy of this so-called journalist with intelligence, grace, and undeniable facts. Pulling out his laptop, Barron began his research. He wasn't just going to respond. He was going to dismantle Mercer's credibility piece by piece. First, he dug into Mercer's past articles. As expected, the journalist had a long history of targeting conservative figures, especially women. He had written scathing pieces about Kayleigh McEnany, Ivanka Trump, and even Sarah Huckabee Sanders. But what stood out most was his blatant inconsistency. In one article, he had praised Michelle Obama for being a reserved and dignified First Lady. Yet he criticized Melania for being cold and detached. The double standard was glaring. Next, Barron pulled up clips of his mother's speeches. He found her heartfelt address about cyberbullying, her initiatives for child welfare, and her quiet but effective diplomatic efforts during her time as First Lady. Contrary to Mercer's claims, Melania had not been a passive observer. She had used her platform in her own way, graceful, composed, and unwavering. As Barron compiled his evidence, a thought crossed his mind. What if I don't just write a response? What if I confront him publicly? A smirk played on his lips. The media had always treated him as the silent Trump, assuming he had nothing to say. Maybe it was time to prove them wrong. Barron closed his laptop, his fingers tapping rhythmically on the table. The weight of what he was about to do settled on his shoulders, but he wasn't afraid. The world had underestimated him long enough. He pulled out his phone and opened Twitter. His account was mostly inactive, just a few likes here and there. But that was about to change. His father had built a political empire through social media, but Barron wasn't interested in bombastic statements or controversy. He was going to let the truth do the talking. Barron Trump at Trump official David Mercer's latest article is a masterclass in hypocrisy. Calling my mother an ornamental puppet while praising others for the same traits he condemns? Let's talk facts. Thread below. He knew that one tweet wouldn't be enough. The media thrived on half-truths and out-of-context sound bites. If he was going to dismantle Mercer's argument, he needed to present irrefutable evidence. He began drafting a thread. Mercer says my mother was a silent first lady who stood for nothing. Let's revisit her Be Best initiative, which impacted thousands of children worldwide. He calls her soulless, while ignoring her advocacy against cyberbullying, the same issue that media elites conveniently overlook when their own side engages in it. He praises Michelle Obama for being reserved and dignified, yet attacks my mother for the same approach. Why? Because she's a Trump. Barron, reread his words. He wasn't just defending his mother, he was exposing the blatant media bias. He hit tweet and leaned back. Now he just had to wait. Barron set his phone down, exhaling slowly. He had just done something the media never expected from him. Spoken up. Now it was only a matter of time before the storm began. He didn't have to wait long. Within minutes, notifications flooded his phone. His tweet thread was gaining traction at an alarming rate. Conservative commentators, Trump supporters, and even some moderate voices were retweeting his words, praising him for calling out the hypocrisy. Candace Owens, at Real Candace O, looks like young Barron Trump just dropped the truth bomb on the liberal media. Funny how they scream about double standards but never acknowledge their own. #respect, Charlie Kirk. At Charlie Kirk 11, Barron Trump just took down a journalist with facts. Maybe the media should stop underestimating the next generation of Trumps. #BBist #media bias. But it wasn't just conservatives who reacted. Within an hour, major news outlets were picking up the story. Police car light breaking. Barron Trump fires back at journalists' hit piece on Melania Trump police car light. In a rare move, Barron Trump has taken to social media to defend his mother against a scathing article by liberal journalist David Mercer. The young Trump heir exposed several inconsistencies in Mercer's past writings, sparking a major online debate about media bias. Barron scrolled through the flood of responses. Some were supportive, others dismissive, but one thing was clear. People were paying attention. Then, his phone buzzed with a new notification. David Mercer at Mercer News. I see young Barron Trump has decided to join the world of political discourse. Maybe he should stick to private school debates instead of playing grown-up on Twitter. I stand by every word I wrote. Barron smirked. So, Mercer wants to play? Fine. He had plenty more to say. The fight was just beginning. Barron stared at his screen, Mercer's condescending tweet burning in his mind. So this guy thinks he can dismiss me just because I'm young? Typical. He had seen this tactic before. Liberal journalists loved to belittle and dismiss conservatives, especially when they didn't expect a challenge. But Barron wasn't about to let this slide. He cracked his knuckles and fired off a response. David Mercer, I appreciate your concern for my education, but I assure you, I can handle a simple debate. Instead of dodging, why not address the blatant double standard in your article? Or is intellectual honesty too much to ask? The tweet exploded within seconds. Likes, retweets, and replies came in waves. Mercer had walked right into the trap. Now the public was watching. Wow, Barron just bodied this clown. Someone get Mercer some ice for that burn. Face with tears of joy fire. You love to see it. Barron Trump dismantling liberal media lies in real time. Stay mad, Mercer. But Mercer wasn't ready to back down. Fine, let's talk about double standards. Your mother refused to engage with the press, barely participated in policy discussions, and spent most of her time in silence. The First Lady's role is more than standing around in designer dresses. Barron rolled his eyes. This guy really thinks he's making a point. He quickly typed his next response. So now women need to constantly be in front of cameras to be effective? Interesting. Because I don't recall you criticizing Jackie Kennedy for her quiet grace. Or Michelle Obama when she took breaks from the spotlight. Or does this only apply to conservative women? Boom. The hypocrisy was laid bare. The internet erupted. Hashtags like hashtag David Mercer and hashtag media bias exposed started trending. Even people who weren't Trump supporters began questioning Mercer's argument. Barron leaned back in his chair. He wasn't just winning, he was changing the narrative. And Mercer was running out of ways to spin his lies. The battle between Barron Trump and David Mercer had officially become a media spectacle. Every major news outlet was now covering the exchange, with headlines plastered across television screens and social media feeds. Barron Trump shuts down liberal journalist in epic Twitter exchange. Barron Trump enters political arena, but is he ready? Barron Trump attacks respected journalist. Another Trump embraces online bullying? Barron smirked. Classic. The same media that had ridiculed him as a child was now desperate to paint him as an aggressor. It was predictable but also amusing. His phone buzzed again. This time it wasn't just notifications, it was a call. "Hello," Barron answered. "Barron." His father's unmistakable voice came through. "I've got to say I like what I'm seeing. You're doing a tremendous job. Really tremendous." Barron chuckled. "You're not mad that I jumped into this?" "Mad? No. This is what we do, we fight back. But listen, the media's going to come after you now, harder than ever. You've got to be ready for that." "I know," Barron said, nodding. "I expected it." "Good," Donald said. "But don't let them dictate the terms of the fight. If they twist your words, hit them back with facts. That's how you win." "Got it." As soon as he hung up, his phone buzzed again, this time with a new development. Mercer had just published an article responding to the controversy. Barron Trump is just another entitled Trump using his family name to gain attention, Barron sighed. He had been hoping Mercer would at least try to engage in an actual debate. Instead, the journalist had resorted to personal attacks. Fine. If Mercer wanted to play dirty, Barron would take him down with something even more powerful, cold, hard truth. He started typing his next move. Barron Trump read Mercer's article carefully. It was full of the usual media tricks. Name-calling, dismissing facts, and trying to paint Barron as an arrogant rich kid who had no right to speak up. But there was one glaring flaw in Mercer's approach. He still hadn't answered a single one of my points. Barron smirked. If there was one thing he had learned from his father, it was that when your opponent refuses to argue with facts, you've already won. He took a deep breath and began crafting his next tweet. "David Mercer still hasn't explained why my mother is criticized for being reserved, while others are praised for it. Instead, he calls me entitled for daring to ask the question. Facts aren't personal attacks, David. But I get it. When the truth isn't on your side, you distract." Within seconds, the internet exploded again. Barron Trump just destroyed Mercer with one tweet. The left can't handle their own contradictions being exposed. This kid is going places. Hashtag Barron for president. Mercer, however, wasn't done. He fired back with another tweet, dripping with sarcasm. "Sure, Barron, because growing up in a gold-plated penthouse really gives you insight into media integrity. Maybe focus on passing high school before lecturing professionals." Barron rolled his eyes. Mercer wasn't even pretending to argue anymore, he was just attacking. Pathetic. But Barron wasn't about to let him get the last word. "Ah, the classic you're too young to have opinions defense. Guess what, David? The Constitution doesn't have an age limit on free speech. But keep dodging the actual debate. Everyone sees it." It was over. Mercer had no comeback. The world had watched as a so-called seasoned journalist got dismantled by a teenager. Barron smiled. His mother always taught him that true strength was in composure, in standing firm without losing dignity. He had done exactly that. And in the process, he had won. Barron refreshed his feed, watching as Mercer's mentions filled with people calling him out. Some were conservative commentators, others were just everyday Americans who had grown tired of media hypocrisy. Even a few liberal voices admitted that Mercer had handled this poorly. Barron Trump just schooled David Mercer on media bias. Maybe next time, Mercer should come prepared instead of resorting to playground insults. Independent journalist Glenn Greenwald, at Greenwald, regardless of where you stand politically, Barron Trump exposed a fundamental problem in the media: selective outrage and double standards. It's hard to argue with the truth. Meanwhile, the mainstream media was scrambling to spin the story. CNN aired a segment titled Barron Trump's Dangerous Online Rhetoric, trying to paint him as a young extremist for simply defending his mother. MSNBC brought on a panel of experts debating whether or not Barron was being coached by his father. Barron laughed. They still don't get it. This wasn't about politics. This wasn't even about the Trumps versus the media. This was about fairness. His mother had been unfairly attacked, and he had simply pointed out the hypocrisy. The fact that the media was melting down over a few well-worded tweets showed just how fragile their arguments were. Then his phone buzzed again. This time, a text from his mother. Panasna Sam Na Teeb Moj sign. Red heart. I am proud of you, my son. Barron smiled. His mother rarely got involved in these fights, but he knew she appreciated his defense. That meant more to him than any trending hashtag. But just as he was about to put his phone away, he saw something that made him pause. David Mercer had just posted a cryptic tweet. You may have won this round, Barron, but this isn't over. Barron raised an eyebrow. Is that a threat? He had thought this was just another Twitter spat. But now it seemed Mercer was taking this personally. Fine. If Mercer wanted to escalate, Barron would be ready. Because one thing was certain, this fight wasn't over yet. Barron Trump read Mercer's latest tweet again, his instincts telling him this wasn't just some empty boast. Something was coming. And he was right. Within hours, an article appeared on several major news sites. Police Carlight David Mercer exclusive. Inside Barron Trump's social media war, is he really writing his own tweets? Police Carlight, the article claimed that Barron's recent tweets weren't his own, that he was being coached by his father's political team to launch a calculated attack against the press. Mercer even cited anonymous sources from within Trump's circle who claimed that Barron's Twitter thread was strategically planned by high-level conservatives. The smear campaign had begun. Barron sighed. He had seen this happen to his father countless times. When the media couldn't win a debate, they resorted to character assassination. His phone buzzed. Another call from his father. Barron. Donald Trump's voice came through loud and clear. They're trying to discredit you. Typical. They can't stand that you embarrassed them. So now they'll say you didn't do it yourself. Barron rubbed his temple. I knew they'd do something like this, but it's pathetic. They're acting like I'm incapable of forming thoughts. Well, that's how they operate, his father said. When they lose, they don't admit it. They rewrite the story. So what do I do? Barron asked. Simple. You call it out. Tell the truth. And don't let them shake you. Barron nodded. His father was right. He took a deep breath, opened Twitter, and fired back. Ah, here we go. When you can't beat the argument, attack the person. No, Mercer, I don't need a team to tell the truth. But it's funny how you suddenly believe in anonymous sources when they serve your agenda. Within minutes, the post went viral. The hashtag write my own tweets began trending, with supporters mocking Mercer's ridiculous claim. Barron had shut down the lie before it could spread. But he had a feeling Mercer wasn't done yet. And he was right, because the journalist was about to take things to the next level. Barron Trump had shut down Mercer's first attempt to discredit him, but the journalist wasn't backing off. Instead, he escalated. David Mercer releases proof that Barron Trump's tweets were orchestrated by the Trump team. Police Carlight Barron saw the headline and clicked on the article. Mercer had compiled screenshots of past Trump campaign social media strategies, claiming they showed how Barron's tweets fit the pattern of a coordinated political maneuver. He even suggested that Barron's account might be partially managed by former White House staffers. The accusations were ridiculous, but that didn't stop certain media outlets from running with them. CNN's evening panel was already discussing the claim. Host. So, do we really believe that a 17-year-old is this politically sharp? Or is Barron just another pawn in the Trump machine? Guest analyst. It's clear that this is part of a larger conservative effort to weaponize social media. Barron Trump is just a convenient face for it. Barron sighed. They really think I'm incapable of forming thoughts on my own? His phone buzzed. This time it was Ivanka. Hey kid. she said warmly. I saw what's happening. You okay? Barron smiled at the sound of his sister's voice. Yeah, I'm fine. It's just annoying. They don't want to debate me, so they're trying to make it look like I don't even exist. Ivanka chuckled. Welcome to the club. They did the same to me, remember? Said I was just my dad's mouthpiece. When they can't beat you, they try to erase you. So what do I do now? Barron asked. Same thing you've been doing, expose them, she said. Make them prove their claims. They won't be able to. Barron nodded. He knew exactly what to do. He opened Twitter again and crafted his response. Barron Trump, David Mercer now claims my tweets fit a pattern of a political strategy. Let me clarify. The only strategy one follow is common sense. But since you love patterns, let's look at yours. When was the last time you applied the same scrutiny to a Democrat's kid? I'll wait. The internet erupted. Conservative and independent commentators immediately seized on the hypocrisy, pulling up examples of media double standards when it came to the children of politicians. Within minutes, #MercerPattern started trending. Barron had once again flipped the narrative. But Mercer wasn't done yet, and his next move was about to get personal. Barron Trump knew Mercer was on the ropes, but a cornered journalist with an agenda was a dangerous thing. Sure enough, Mercer didn't waste time. Just hours after Barron's last tweet, a new headline surfaced. The dark side of Barron Trump, the untold truth. Behind the Trump Air police car light, Barron's stomach tightened as he clicked on the article. Mercer had shifted tactics. Since he couldn't win the argument, he was now going after Barron personally. The article dredged up everything it could. Barron's privileged upbringing at Trump Tower and Mar-a-Lago. Old rumors about his private school life. Baseless claims that he had been shielded from reality his entire life. Even past tabloid gossip suggesting he was aloof or distant at public events. Mercer painted a picture of an arrogant rich kid who had never faced a real challenge in his life. It was a complete hit job. Barron clenched his fists. So this is how they play. If you can't silence someone, you try to ruin their reputation? His phone lit up with messages. His family was already rallying behind him. Eric Trump, ignore this garbage. You're handling this better than they ever expected. Lara Trump, they're scared of you. That's why they're going low. Barron took a deep breath. He wasn't going to let Mercer define him. He had spoken out to defend his mother, not to become a political figure, but because the truth mattered. And now he had to defend himself. He opened Twitter and typed his response. David Mercer, when you attacked my mother, I called out your double standard. When you couldn't debate me, you questioned if I wrote my own tweets. And now you're resorting to personal smears. This isn't journalism. It's desperation. The tweet spread like wildfire. Even some of Mercer's colleagues started questioning his tactics. David Mercer isn't a journalist. He's an activist with a grudge. Barron Trump called him out. And now Mercer is lashing out like a child. But Mercer wasn't done. He was about to make his biggest mistake yet. Because in his desperation, he was about to cross a line that even his own supporters wouldn't defend. Barron Trump had seen the media play dirty before, but he wasn't prepared for what came next. David Mercer, in a final act of desperation, went beyond just attacking Barron. He dragged Melania Trump into the mud in a way that shocked even his own allies. David Mercer accuses Melania Trump of using Barron to attack the press police car light. The article was vile. Mercer suggested that Melania was coaching Barron behind the scenes, using him as a pawn in some larger Trump family media strategy. Worse, he dug up old, debunked conspiracy theories about Melania, questioning her immigration history, her modeling career, and even implying she was never a willing first lady but a reluctant participant in her husband's ambitions. The hit piece was a complete disgrace. Even left-wing journalists hesitated to defend Mercer. Some remained silent, while others subtly distanced themselves. Vanity Fair columnist Julia Yaffe. I'm no fan of the Trumps, but dragging Melania into this feels unnecessary. Not a great look. Independent journalist Glenn Greenwald. Barron Trump called out a journalist's double standard. That journalist responded with a personal attack, then went after his mother. This is not journalism. It's pure malice. Barron sat in silence, staring at the screen. He felt anger, not for himself, but for his mother. She had never sought the spotlight the way others did. She had endured years of criticism without responding. And now, when her son stood up for her, the media was trying to twist it into something sinister. His phone buzzed. It was a message from his mother. Melania Trump, do not stoop to their level. The truth is your power. Barron closed his eyes. He wanted to tear Mercer apart. He wanted to unleash everything he had. But his mother's words stayed with him. He opened Twitter and composed his response, not with rage, but with calculated precision. David Mercer, you've now resorted to attacking my mother, a woman who has never engaged in these petty fights. That says everything about your character and nothing about hers. You've lost this debate, and everyone sees it. The internet erupted. The shift was undeniable. What had started as a political back and forth was now something bigger. People were calling out the media's cruelty, their obsession with attacking the Trump family no matter what. For the first time, even some mainstream outlets criticized Mercer. The Hill. Did David Mercer go too far? Media reaction mixed after controversial Melania Trump article. Newsweek. David Mercer faces backlash for dragging Melania Trump into online feud with Barron. Barron had done what no one expected. He had forced the media to check itself. But Mercer wasn't ready to surrender just yet. Because now he was about to make one last desperate move. David Mercer was losing control of the narrative. His attempt to discredit Barron Trump had backfired. His attack on Melania had alienated even some of his own supporters. But instead of backing down, he did what desperate people always do. He doubled down. David Mercer calls for Barron Trump to be investigated for social media activity. Police Carlight Barron nearly laughed when he saw the headline. Mercer had just played his last, weakest card. The article suggested that Barron's Twitter account should be monitored to see if he was being fed talking points by far-right influencers. Mercer even floated the idea that Barron's tweets might be crafted by Trump political strategists. It was absurd. It was desperate. And it was a total overreach. The backlash was immediate. Now they want to investigate a 17-year-old for expressing his own opinion? The media is unhinged. Barron Trump is under attack for tweeting? This is peak clown world. Clownface, the media has officially lost it. First, they mock Barron Trump for being silent. Then, when he speaks, they try to silence him. The outrage spread like wildfire. Barron wasn't just winning. He had forced Mercer into a self-inflicted scandal. Even some left-leaning voices questioned the move. You don't have to like Trump, but a journalist calling for a teenager to be investigated over tweets? That's next-level insane. The White House was forced to comment. When a reporter asked if the Biden administration believed Barron Trump's social media should be monitored, the press secretary awkwardly dodged the question. Mercer had officially gone too far. Barron smirked as he typed his final response. First, they say I'm too young to have opinions. Then, they say I don't write my own tweets. Now, they want me investigated for using Twitter? David, just admit you lost. It was over. Mercer had buried himself. His credibility was in shambles. His own colleagues were distancing themselves. And Barron Trump had just won his first political battle without ever intending to fight one. But there was still one thing left to do. Because despite everything, Mercer still hadn't apologized. And Barron had one final move to make. Barron Trump leaned back in his chair, watching the fallout unfold in real time. Mercer was drowning in backlash. The media circus he had created was now consuming him, with even some of his usual allies turning against him. But there was one thing missing: an apology. David Mercer had built his career on attacking conservatives, but this time he had gone too far. He had targeted Barron for simply speaking out, smeared his mother in the process, and now he was facing the consequences. Barron knew he could walk away now. He had already won. But there was something deeper at play. This wasn't just about him. This was about setting a precedent. For years, the media had treated conservatives, especially the Trump family, like punching bags. They had smeared Melania. They had mocked his father, his siblings, even himself. They had pushed double standards, knowing they'd never be held accountable. Barron wasn't going to let Mercer slink away without admitting what he had done. He opened Twitter and typed his next move. Barron Trump, David Mercer. You've spent days attacking my mother, spreading lies about me, and calling for a monitoring of my social media. Now you have two choices. Admit you were wrong or continue proving my point about media bias. Your move. Senator Ted Cruz. Barron Trump is doing more to expose media hypocrisy at 17 than most politicians do in their careers. Mercer, it's time to own up. The Daily Wire. Barron Trump isn't just winning. He's holding the media accountable in a way no one expected. Will Mercer apologize? Even celebrities chimed in. Joe Rogan never thought I'd see the day when a 17-year-old had more integrity than half the media. Barron Trump is making these guys look like amateurs. Barron refreshed his feed. Would Mercer apologize? Or would he dig himself even deeper? One thing was certain, he had no way out, because this time the world was watching. David Mercer was trapped. Barron Trump's challenge had gone viral, and now the entire world was waiting for his response. Apologizing would mean admitting defeat, not just to Barron, but to everyone who had called out the media's double standards. Ignoring it would only make him look weak. The pressure was mounting. Even journalists from his own network were distancing themselves. CNN's Jake Tapper. I don't agree with Barron Trump on much, but Mercer should have left his mother out of this. Bad journalism. Washington Post columnist David Swerdlick. Attacking the Trump family is fair game in politics, but calling for a teenager to be monitored for using Twitter? That's excessive. Mercer had no good options. And then, after 24 hours of silence, he finally cracked. David Mercer, I stand by my reporting, but I recognize that some of my words about Barron Trump and his mother were taken in a way I did not intend. If my remarks caused offense, I regret that. It was the weakest apology possible. Not a real admission of guilt, just a generic, I regret if anyone was offended statement. Barron smirked. Typical. The internet wasn't buying it either. Candace Owens, I regret if anyone was offended, is not an apology. Mercer is only doing this because he got caught. Weak. Elon Musk, translation. I regret that I got destroyed online. Barron could have responded with more fire, but he didn't need to. The world already knew he had won. Instead, he kept it simple. Barron Trump, David, next time just tell the truth from the start. It's easier than backpedaling. Mercer had been humiliated, and the media had been forced to confront its bias. But just when Barron thought it was over, something unexpected happened. A call came through. The name on the screen made his eyes widen. It was his father, and he had something big to say. Barron hesitated for a moment before answering. His father rarely called for something small. If he was reaching out now, it meant something big was happening. He picked up. Barron, my boy. Donald Trump's voice boomed through the speaker. I gotta say, I am so proud of you. That was absolutely incredible. Barron smiled. Thanks, Dad. I just told the truth. You did more than that, Trump continued. You exposed them. The media, the double standards, the whole racket. And you did it without yelling, without name-calling. You completely outclassed them. Mercer looks like a total fool. Barron chuckled. Yeah, his apology was pathetic. It wasn't an apology. Trump corrected him. It was a sad little attempt to save face. You forced him into it. You won. Barron had to admit it felt good hearing that from his father. For years, he had watched the media attack his family, but this was the first time he had been the one to push back and win. You know what this means, right? Trump asked. What? You've got them scared. Barron raised an eyebrow. Scared of what? I'm just a 17-year-old with a Twitter account. Trump laughed. Exactly. You're 17, and you just crushed one of their biggest voices. That's why they tried so hard to silence you. And that's why they're going to try again. Barron's expression grew serious. He knew his father was right. The media never truly admitted defeat. They might be licking their wounds now, but eventually, they'd regroup and come at him even harder. So what do I do? Barron asked. His father's voice was calm but firm. You keep doing exactly what you're doing. Stay sharp. Stay honest. And most importantly, never let them define you. Barron nodded. He wasn't going to let anyone, especially not the media, tell him who he was. As he hung up the phone, he realized something. This wasn't just about a Twitter fight anymore. This was the beginning of something bigger. And whether he liked it or not, Barron Trump was no longer just the quiet kid in the background. He was a force to be reckoned with. The storm had settled. Barron Trump had won. David Mercer had been humiliated. The media was forced to confront its hypocrisy. But as Barron scrolled through his phone, he noticed something interesting. His follower count had skyrocketed. Before this whole ordeal, he had barely 50,000 followers, mostly conservative supporters of his family who followed him out of curiosity. Now, 1.2 million followers. His name was everywhere. People, both supporters and critics, were talking about him. And more importantly, they were listening. He had a voice now, a real one. His DMs were flooded with messages from journalists, influencers, and political figures. Some congratulated him. Others invited him for interviews. And then he saw one that made him pause. From Tucker Carlson: Barron, I'd love to have you on my show. You've handled yourself with more poise and intelligence than most politicians. Let's talk. Barron sat back, thinking. He hadn't planned for this. He had never sought the spotlight. His entire life he had been the quiet Trump, the one who stayed out of the headlines. But this past week had changed everything. He had stood up for his mother. He had exposed a corrupt journalist. He had shown the world that he wasn't just some silent kid in the background. And now people wanted to hear what he had to say. He thought about his father's advice. Never let them define you. This was his moment. And for the first time, Barron Trump wondered, maybe it was time to step into the spotlight. Maybe it was time to speak. He clicked reply. Let's do it. The night before his interview with Tucker Carlson, Barron Trump sat alone in his room, staring at his reflection in the mirror. For years, he had avoided the spotlight. Unlike his father and older siblings, he had never given interviews, never made public statements, never engaged with the media. But everything had changed. Now, people saw him as something more than just the youngest Trump. He had a platform, a voice. And tomorrow, for the first time, the world would hear it. His phone buzzed. Proud of you, little bro. Just be yourself. You've already won. He smiled. His family had been through this process before. They knew what was coming. The media would try to spin his words. His critics would twist everything he said. Some would dismiss him outright, claiming he was just writing his father's name. But none of that mattered. He had already proved he could hold his own. The next evening, Barron arrived at the studio for the interview. Tucker Carlson greeted him with a firm handshake. Excited? Tucker asked. Barron smirked. More like ready. The cameras rolled. Barron, this is your first interview ever. Why now? Barron leaned forward. Because I got tired of the media deciding who I am. The interview was electric. Barron spoke with calm confidence, answering every question with intelligence and wit. He broke down the media's hypocrisy, exposed Mercer's bias, and defended his mother with unwavering loyalty. By the end of the segment, social media was ablaze. Police car light trending #1. Barron Trump speaks out. Police car light. Ben Shapiro. Barron Trump is sharper than half of Congress. Give this kid a microphone more often. Megyn Kelly. I expected Barron Trump to be smart. I didn't expect him to be this good. The interview had changed everything. Barron Trump wasn't just a viral moment anymore. He was a rising star. Barron Trump's interview with Tucker Carlson was a turning point. Millions watched as he confidently dismantled the media's lies, defended his mother, and exposed David Mercer's double standards. But not everyone was pleased. The media had underestimated him once. They wouldn't make that mistake again. Within hours, major outlets launched a coordinated attack. Barron Trump's rise, a new far-right figure? Should we be concerned about Barron Trump's influence? Police car light. The New York Times. The dangerous normalization of Barron Trump as a political voice. They weren't just attacking him now. They were trying to frame him. They painted him as a radical conservative, an extension of his father's politics. They suggested that his voice was dangerous, that he was part of a new generation of Trump extremism. But it wasn't working. The public wasn't buying it. Unlike the media's past attacks on his father, Barron wasn't bombastic or aggressive. He wasn't slinging insults or making outrageous claims. He was just telling the truth. And that terrified them. His Twitter following grew even more. Supporters flooded social media, calling out the media's hypocrisy. Even people who weren't Trump supporters admitted that Barron was being unfairly targeted. They don't know what to do with this kid. He's smart, he's calm, and he's calling out the nonsense without even trying to be political. That's why they're scared. Meanwhile, David Mercer had gone completely silent. The journalist who started it all had been utterly humiliated. He had gone from one of the media's loudest voices to a man whose credibility was in tatters. Barron had won. But he wasn't done yet, because now there was a bigger question on everyone's mind. What comes next for Barron Trump? Barron Trump sat in his room, watching the world react to his interview. The media had thrown everything at him. Smears, attacks, even attempts to paint him as dangerous. And yet, he had emerged stronger than ever. His Twitter following had soared past 5 million. People weren't just listening to him now. They were waiting to hear what he would say next. His phone buzzed. Another text from his father. Donald Trump. Incredible job, Barron. The media is panicking. They don't know what to do with you. Keep going. But Barron wasn't sure what keeping going even meant. He never planned to enter politics. He wasn't looking for fame. He had only spoken out because a journalist had tried to humiliate his mother. And yet, something had changed. People saw him as a leader now. A new wave of young conservatives had begun rallying around him. His name was being floated in political discussions, his words analyzed by commentators. Then he saw a new headline. Police car light, is Barron Trump the future of American conservatism? Police car light, he almost laughed. Me? A political leader? And yet, deep down he couldn't deny it. He had something most politicians didn't. Authenticity. People liked him because he wasn't scripted. He wasn't playing a role. He spoke the truth and he didn't care about political correctness. The more he thought about it, the more he realized something. This wasn't the end of his story. It was just the beginning. He opened Twitter one last time that night and sent out a single message. Barron Trump, the media tried to silence me. It didn't work. Maybe they should get used to hearing my voice. The tweet exploded instantly. Within minutes, #Barron 2028 was trending. He shook his head with a chuckle. Politics? He muttered to himself. I'm 17. But deep down, he knew the world wasn't going to stop talking about Barron Trump anytime soon. And maybe, just maybe, he had something bigger to offer. Because for the first time, he wasn't just Barron Trump, the quiet kid in the background. He was a force of his own. And the world was watching.